The purpose of the Global CFO Council is to provide an educational and networking forum for senior financial executives in order to share best practices, discuss current financial issues, and to learn about current topics related to the performance of their jobs. Membership is open to senior financial executives including CFOs, financial VPs, and treasurers. We hope that you'll become a member of the Global CFO Council today. To join, please visit the membership tab at globalcfocouncil.com.
Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Robert.
I am very excited. This is my favorite part. I get to introduce the speaker. And Mike, something I didn't tell you before we did this is that my shtick is that I don't read your bio. Thank you for sending it to me. I find stuff on the internet and then I reveal it while I'm introducing you. And some of this may or may not be true. So I've been wrong before. I've been horribly wrong before, but that's also funny. So let's get started. I'm going to go through, and if I pause for effect, give me a yes or no that is actually correct. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. Mike Cinca is the CEO and founder at Movilla. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Looks like you are a serial entrepreneur. This isn't your first go at owning and starting a business. I believe you were the founder of Authority, and that ended up being sold to Equifax. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, that's right. 2011.
I think you're a pretty smart guy. Looks like undergrad in mechanical and aerospace engineering from Princeton. Is that correct?
Yes, but I think my four kids would tell you that probably I'm not so smart. So they're done.
Things I think about you, speaking of kids, is I think your son also graduated from Princeton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very good. Yeah, my oldest. Yep.
Damn. And back in the day, I think maybe you went to high school in Illinois and you were on the varsity track team. Is that correct?
Yeah, John Hersey High School. Yeah, that's right, in Mount Prospect. Arlington Heights, actually, the high school's in Arlington Heights.
And I think this is
high
school picture.
Oh, that's
You're
funny.
A handsome man, brother.
Yeah, that's like a freshman or a sophomore photo. Very nice. Well done, Robert. By the way, payback's a bitch.
Well, Mike, you still have fantastic hair. And that funny. Really bothers me, but I am not going to hold that against you. I now am going to release the reins to you. I'm going to stop sharing and would love for you to share. And I'm super excited about this. As you bring up the slides, workforce management, I'm so selfish. I want to hear about this. My background's in professional management and manufacturing, and I'm constantly struggling with resource allocation and workforce management. And I am going to be quiet and I'm going to be taking a ton of notes. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction. I appreciate it. And the high school, the awkward teenage photo as well. Thanks, Robert. That's awesome. Well, thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity to come talk to the group today. My goal here is that regardless of the content and material, that you guys learn something new and that you leave with sort of a different perspective on how to think about work and resourcing in your organizations. And there are a couple of premises around this. So once again, I think I don't need to sort of cover myself anymore. Robert did a great job of that. I'll cover the agenda of what I'm going to talk about today. And there are three things I'm going to talk about. One is the mathematical root of bad forecasting. So I'm going to talk about this because this is sort of can be a problem, can sort of poison the well for information in your organization. And I love the fact that I'm talking to a group of CFOs because you're all mathematically minded, right? Everybody in this call is precise mathematically. So I love talking to engineers. I love talking to finance folks because they understand fundamentally the process that I'll be addressing here. The second component is what is real-time resourcing and why is it important to your organization? And in manufacturing parlance, the best way to think about it would be just-in-time manufacturing, right? So this idea of real-time resourcing serves a very similar purpose to this idea of just-in-time. And then finally, what is a required architecture for real-time resourcing? What do you need to have in your organization? And it's an evolution and a journey. And there are a couple of concepts that I'll fundamentally talk about when you think about digitally transforming how your business gets managed. And this concept of digital transformation and what it means, where we're going. And as we've seen in our society, these things happen in fits and starts. We can identify what's required for the digital transformation, but because of change management issues, political, social, structure, and technical issues, sometimes there can be barriers to those things. And so we have to go sort of through a maturity model to think about how we can digitally transform a process. All right, so let's talk about this first thing, the mathematical root of a lot of forecasting problems. And obviously in finance, forecasting is a big part of everyone on this call's job, and doing that accurately is a big part. But I will tell you that, and I'm sure as you're all aware, that the rest of the organization outside of engineering lacks the precision, or I would say the culture of precision, that maybe finance has. And as Robert said, I'm a founder of multiple businesses and obviously very intimately involved in organizations' financials at all sizes and process. And so having accurate, reporting to my board and my investors, having accuracy around forecasts and process is a really important thing. And so one of the reasons why I started this company was the real need around work automation. But there was an underlying fundamental problem with how human beings, we think about work and process and what we get wrong. And at the root of this is something we call the project paradox. And you may have heard of something called the birthday paradox. And Robert, you're the only person I can see on the phone, so on this call, so others may have heard of the birthday paradox. What the birthday paradox says is if you have 23 people in a room, there's a 50% chance that those two people share the same, there are at least two people that share the same birthday. And if you have 75 people in a room, there's a 99.99% chance that two people share the same birthday. And that doesn't make sense to us. Like 23 people, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter that it makes sense. What it underscores is human beings in general, our sense or our intuition about arithmetic is correct. Our intuition around probability is horrible. It's horrible. And so that's why we get that wrong. Well, what does that have to do with work? Well, what it has to do with work is our intuition about whether or not something's going to be done on time, whether we have the right resources. And this gets into a probabilistic function. So if we look at a work effort in your business and you say, oh, our team on general gets their stuff done, any individual gets their work done on time 90% of the time. If you have an effort where there are 20 tasks on the critical path, and the critical path is that chain of dependent tasks, one is dependent on two, is dependent on three, so on and so forth. And maybe the overall project has 100 tasks in it, but 20 of those are this critical path. The birthday paradox or the project paradox comes into play here. What's the probability that it's going to be done on time? It's only 12%. And as you drop that team reliability to 80 and to 70%, the odds get really, really bad. And if you look at a matrix for this, you can see that a really tiny project of 10 tasks, when people get their stuff done 75% of the time, you still only have a 1 in 20 chance of getting this done on time. In a larger project, a strategic project for your organization, product delivery, implementation, process, maybe your product delivery for your customers, that could easily have 100 tasks in the critical path. And if your team members, on average, deliver on time 95% of the time, there's a 0.6% chance that that project, unaffected, will deliver on time. And so you got to know that this is the dragon you face when you're managing work in your organization, and everybody gets this probability wrong. So, and this is sort of a law of gravity when you have large, complex projects. If anyone's ever renovated a home or built a new home, it's why it is never delivered on time. Because as we know, a lot of general contractors and subs aren't in that 95 or 99% ratio, and there's a lot more than 100 tasks in the critical path. So mathematically, it's impossible. The only way you deliver on time is you have PMs, program managers, and people stressing out, working weekends and evenings to overcome this problem, right? So I'll tell you why this is important, but the important thing to know is this is lurking everywhere in your complex projects. This is the dragon that you have to do battle with. And really, as human beings, once again, because we inherently stink at probability and we have limited abilities in arithmetic, we've got to solve for this. So I'm going to step aside just because I said this is sort of an underlying fundamental problem, and I'll start to talk about how it manifests itself later in the work. So let's talk about real-time resourcing, and I'll come back to the math problem again a little later. Why do you need real-time resourcing? The first is workforce optimization. This directly comes into margins. The more effectively you can do real-time resourcing and understand accurately the resourcing requirements in your organization to deliver your products, services, or internal efforts, the more you can understand that shift of work and responsibilities, the more you can optimize the white space that may exist for any worker, right? If you assign someone to a project and go, oh, they're 100% of this project and there's a delay for a month, are you retasking that person? You're paying that person, that's available resource. If they are a billable resource, moving up that billable resource a couple of percentage points in utilization is all margin for your organization. So workforce optimization, a really important element. The second thing is faster and more accurate revenue recognition. So this is a big frustration that we hear from a lot of finance folks is operations and sales inability to accurately identify when that revenue can be recognized from operations on delivery or sales on forecasting and process. Also, headcount management, and we'll talk about that a little later as well. And then finally, reducing burnout and turnover. Unfortunately, most organizations ask more of their best people, and without any mathematical representation of what you're really asking, those people just suck it up in many cases, and they'll do it because there are people, they're people pleasers. They want to do the work. And then what ends up happening is it's not them that quits. It's their significant other that quits you because they're tired of this person not coming home, tired of them seeing burnt out, and they push them eventually to say, hey, you need to bounce. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous that this continues to happen month after month. And the replacement of your best people is a ridiculously expensive thing. All right. So most organizations have resourcing latency. What is resourcing latency? Resourcing latency is this delayed, incomplete, inaccurate analysis of resourcing requirements to deliver the goods, services, or projects that you have in place. Sort of a generic definition. But at the root of that is most organizations think about people in positions. Oh, we have Susan, she's a SQL. We have Joe, he's a project manager. And resourcing in an organization isn't just people in positions. And one of the digital transformations that needs and is occurring in certain segments of the industry, and we have a very large partnership with Komatsu, the heavy equipment manufacturer, to bring autonomous work management to the construction industry, as well as other industries we're involved in, is to change this concept of we shouldn't just be managing work, we should be programming work. We should be thinking about work like it's programming because we need to apply that same level of discipline to how we track, manage, and look at that work. You apply that level of discipline, and finance has always had to apply that level of audited discipline to the numbers. That doesn't exist in the vast majority of organizations on the work side, and it can. Technology and automation can allow for that. And so resourcing really is this mathematical relationship between the resources, their skills, their availability, their capacity, the definition, that person's schedule, and the dependencies. It's this idea of end-to-end work programming. So why do most organizations have this latency? One, they can't accommodate the hyper-dynamic business environment. Things continually change. And that's a function of the number of variables, projects, teams, customers, and the fact that human beings are these nonlinear creatures that exist. It's not like the tires on your car that are always on your car and are always available and you can always drive on them. People take vacation, their mothers are getting their hips replaced, a project gets delayed, it's an outside project, there's a rain delay. All of those factors come in, and the data that you had yesterday is no good today. Oh, that deal that we thought we were going to close in 3 weeks, it just got delayed a quarter. Well, are you basing hiring decisions on that? The other thing is most organizations don't contemplate all current and future work. It's not just about the projects that you have going on, but it's things coming in through intake, and it's what you have in the funnel, what your organization has in the funnel today, the latest up-to-the-minute information and how you're modeling that data. Because when you're trying to make financial decisions around this and forecast, especially on the revenue generation side, that is a hyper-dynamic process as well. And if you're not contemplating all of that data into your picture, you have an incomplete picture. And then finally, the organizations lack the automation and integration to accomplish those two things, this hyper-dynamic environment and getting all of the data and the information in together. All right, so what's the architecture that you need in place or that you need to do to start to begin this journey in this process. And we use the acronym A.I.M to get resourcing success. And the first part of A.I.M is automation, automating functions, and automation occurs because it's inefficient for humans to do it. And in some cases, human beings simply lack the capacity to manage the volume of information to produce an accurate answer. The second component of it is integration. We talked a little about that in the last slide, integrating the appropriate information so you understand exactly what data needs to come in to get the answers you need to do. And then finally, modeling. It's an exercise of having a usable model for the kind of work your organization does. And this gets you beyond sort of the swag process you have. And there's a lot of different ways, and we'll talk about how you can model and grow into different modeling techniques. Okay, let's talk about the first component of this, and this is automation. And I talked to you a little before about this sort of concept of digital transformation of work, thinking about a project or a work effort like a programming language. And there isn't a programmer in the world that can deploy code without a debugger. The best programmer in the world makes stupid mistakes, and those mistakes would crash and burn software. We utterly depend on debuggers to understand what dumb mistakes we made, what processes we made. That doesn't exist. Well, it does exist. We have this technology, but this is a first of a kind technology to autonomously monitor and review schedules, work plans, and projects to diagnose those. And so what you're looking at here, we're talking about, you've got to autonomously monitor your work plans and schedules because they change every day. People's calendars change every day. The resources change every day. Customers don't deliver what they're supposed to do. That creates a delay in a critical path. It lives within a portfolio of projects, which has a cascading effect. There is no human being that is going to be able to manage the calendar math, the schedules, the tasks, the dependencies, and come up with an accurate answer. And the reality is that nearly all of these plans have problems and issues. So you're looking at sort of a segment of a plan here and results from a debugger, which is sort of saying, hey, you've got 3 milestones at risk, there's 3 critical path delays, but diagnosing what's broken in a common scheduler plan that's going to produce an inaccurate answer. And there isn't anybody on this call that wouldn't go, wait, you're telling me the finance software that we use doesn't call out when the columns don't foot, when assets aren't equal, to liabilities and equity? Wait, what? You're kidding me, right? But that's what happens with all the work management software everybody's using. As someone in our team said, it's not 2 + 2 = 3, it's 2 + 2 = Labrador Retriever. So the challenge is, how do you get an accurate forecast when the plan's broken? And it doesn't mean that the people managing the plans are incompetent. It just means they don't have a tool. Nobody on this call could manage a $100 million business without software to automatically audit, calculate, schedule, and track that. So this idea around automation and remediation of the work plan to identify capacity conflicts, blocks, critical path delays, so you can get an updated and accurate picture of, hey, I know you're saying that this is going to be delivered on April 27th, but based on the discrete math of this, it really looks like June 15th. So now we've got to, and when we know and we have more time to solve a problem, our probability of solving that problem goes way up. Would you rather have 2 days notice that your project's going to be a month late, or would you rather have 45 days notice? And that's the big issue that you can appreciate. And we've got customers who have used this to implement massive HCMs, tens of millions of dollars of projects over years and delivered on time. There were problems in the project, but they found out about them very, very early, and they were able to resolve those. So automation, having it be objective, not subjective. So finance is a very objective discipline. I'm sure you don't love when you're told, oh, it's red, it's yellow, it's green. Well, it was red last month, and then the project went to yellow. Why did it go to yellow? Because it got better? No, because people are afraid to show you that it's still red this month, and yellow seems better than red, but I know there's still problems. You want to have an objective measure. That RPAC score up top, think of that like a credit score for the work, right? Credit score embeds a lot of key information so you understand the creditworthiness of an applicant or a process in finance. The RPAC score goes through and looks at a schedule and lets you know a low score and a 0 to 1,000, lets you know one of two things. If it's a low score, it's either, hey, this is a bad plan, meaning it wasn't constructed accurately. So how can we trust the due date? Or B, we have significant delays in this, or we have sufficient capacity conflicts or problems in this. So once again, design to give kind of that high level view. I'll stop there for a minute and see. I've been kind of going for a while. As you can see, I can get pretty excited about this stuff, Robert. So if there's any questions that folks have.
Do, and let's start off first with the most important thing, with the birthday paradox. It is my birthday today.
Happy birthday. Wow. Nice.
And yes, I got like 7 emails. Yes, I will include the whole deck, including that great chart at the beginning. It's like the perfect chart to explain why we're behind schedule and over budget on something. So yes.
Oh yeah.
You ever need an excuse for your mid-year goal? Question number 1 in no particular order is, can you talk a little bit about how important, or is it important, to design for success? Like how before anything gets put into some sort of system of record to track something for there to be automation. Talk about like the beginning, the planning, the design for success. Is there like how to plan, who to include? Do you plan for unknowns? You know, give me a little bit of design discussion and thoughts.
Yeah. So it depends on the scope and the scale of the project, right? So, and going through, if you have a PMO, it depends if your organization has a PMO or doesn't have a PMO. If you have a PMO in your organization, they'll have the mechanics and the process of going through and staging that project and taking it through its life cycle. But obviously resource budgeting is another really critical component as you start any project. And having that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, about resourcing and thumbnail sketching around resourcing and different levels that you can do that will improve the accuracy. The short answer is it depends on your organization and the resources you have to the level of accuracy that you can get in that early stage planning process of the project. The idea of failing fast, you don't want to start a project if you're not going to be able to be resourced accurately in that in the beginning. And it's better to understand accurately if you've got those resources before you begin to engage in a more detailed blown out project plan. So finance should always be involved earlier in that process as someone comes forward. And the people who are delivering those projects and plans have an obligation to provide a framework around the resource requirements in the organization and identify where those gaps exist, because that will create, and where their completion risks exist in that as well. So there's a lot of discipline around that planning process, and probably maybe we can do a follow-on presentation to cover that in the future.
Mike, you talked about the birthday paradox and the idea that it's counter to what many of us think our gut, our swag, our back of the envelope.
Right.
Two questions that kind of on that angle, answer one or both, is there an argument, a counter argument, that you could be too accurate and not agile enough, back of the envelope versus perfect? Any benefit of those quick and crappy decisions? And then the other part of that sub-question is, we all work with people that they're now in executive positions because they've seen a life of success with those back of the envelope swag decisions. And it's very hard to get people to change. Your thoughts on both of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, as far as quick and crappy, whatever solution you use, it should accommodate quick and crappy to start, and then it should be able to grow with maturity as you're willing to contribute more information. So that kind of dovetails to your previous question about the planning process. Start with quick and crappy. And as you go through, as that project gets built out or that work effort gets built out, the reality is that work definition is going to exist somewhere on someone's spreadsheet, buried in a department by somebody, in someone's email, or in a structured plan. But it's not like in a really big project, it doesn't exist anywhere. Having discipline around organizing that information means it can be automated. So, and even if it was quick and crappy can be informed by automation and information getting pulled in to say, hey, we created a basic simple model, but that basic simple model is updated every day with more accurate information about the resources, people in our current situation. So you don't have to build out a massively detailed plan to do this. It can start really simple.
Mike, when you talked about the culture of precision that some areas may not have, I got several comments, and then I personally chuckled. I don't want to point out or focus on any one department, sales, but the CRM, as an example, as a system of record, is not always accurate nor timely. And that's really critical when you're trying to understand push and pull, especially in a professional service firm, as an example, engineering, architects, CPAs, anything, right? When will the next resource be available to meet the needs of the next customer? How do you deal with that when there is not a culture of precision in some areas, maybe?
Yeah. So one of the things I didn't talk about, once again, it's another talk altogether, is the beauty of transparency, right? So I will tell you that in my experience in this process, implementing this in multiple organizations, the minute sales understands that there's transparency around this data that is going to be used autonomously, they begin to implement internal process and best practice to ensure that their best thinking on that basis is accurate, because it won't be in the beginning. But as it gets blown up and data gets reported and says, well, this is what the CRM said, and this is what we're basing information on, then they begin a cadence of understanding, hey, this is out of your control. We're going to be using this data. What is the purpose other than this is just an appointment tracker for you? We're using this for forecasts. So we need your best thinking in this, and we need it updated daily. And by the way, when they know that a deal has shifted a quarter, they can update that immediately. And that has a big impact for a lot of organizations, especially larger opportunities. And there's latency in finding out for finance that a really big deal may get pushed a quarter. And that's a really big deal because now you have HR doing recruiting for that deal. So this comes back to that real-time resourcing problem. So, hey, look, athletes play better when it's on Monday Night Football than they do when it's an untelevised game. When people are looking at the information and they're aware that people are aware of the information, they up their game around accuracy. And that's been my experience over and over and a lot of our customers as well.
Two more questions, and then I'll hold the rest for the end. Question number one, you talked about digital transformation. It's certainly a hot topic in all the accounting journals and engineering and industry in journals that people talk about Industry 4.0, Finance 4.0, and digital transformations, or that all businesses are digital businesses. How does this tie into that? How is this a critical part of being successful on that? And then also any thoughts on the timing of just, say, a finance team trying to undertake a digital transformation?
Yep, great. So a couple of things, I guess I'll say, is when you think about digital transformation in that process, for most organizations, their personnel and their labor costs are the majority of the expense of that business. It is also the least structured execution information for a lot of businesses. On your material supply chain as a manufacturer, you're pretty dialed in to the inventory you have, the orders, the process. That's a very dialed in process because the software in the industry has been mature for a while, and those are static elements. Human beings are not static elements. And so that becomes a really big problem. And the solution to this is to begin this journey of structured management of work. I'll use that sort of generic term. And that's what I was sort of saying, like the programming of work. But it is the process of having a system of record start to look at, I know the cost of this individual. I know what they're resourced on. I know how the thing they're resourced on is changing over time across a portfolio, right? That's a sort of generically saying that in the future, ultimately, and we'll talk about that. I'll talk about a life cycle. I know we're probably going to run short on time. We're already at 12:31 right now, Robert. What time is it okay if we go until?
We have a hard stop at 1.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk about a maturity model and how that can grow and move forward over time for an organization, where people aren't going to immediately switch into a world where everything's autonomously connected and working together. That has to occur kind of in a step-by-step journey. And we'll talk about sort of some of the first steps that you can take about it. And remind me again, what was the second question, Robert?
It hasn't been asked, but I think Mike must know you because this is like the biggest softball question ever for you. But it's around a small firms, even mid-market firms. There's a lot of those on the call. There are different project management tools. I've never used any of them that do this. So Mike, if you had to think really hard, what sort of software tools can be helpful scaled for small or mid-market firms?
Yeah, so I'll say a couple things. There are a lot of you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a work management, project management platform out there, right? And that's the reality. And a lot of organizations are probably using a lot of the tools that you've heard of out there. There's a massive number of those tools. I will tell you definitively, and this is verified by analysts from organizations like Forrester, Gartner, and others, nobody is handling the structured, programmatic, autonomous management of work like we are in what we're doing. So, we have a lot of organizations that are switching over from other platforms like Smartsheet and Asana, Monday.com, where those platforms were used, but ultimately the vast majority of work management platforms in the market today are managing lists. And they do a really good job of communicating that list across large groups of people. But what they're not doing is they're not doing the accounting of the work in a rigorous manner. And once again, that's why I said we need to be talking to CFOs, because there's rigor in finance. There is uncompromising rigor around looking at the numbers in the process. And that is what's going to be required for this digital transformation. I understand that organizations will transform over time, but the expectation to say, don't document this work anywhere, document it in a centralized point, and the software should be able to autonomously look at that and give you better insights than you have today. Yeah, I don't want to over promote our own product too much, but I will tell you that nobody in the world is doing what we're doing. It's why Komatsu partnered with us. It's why we won Project Management Solution of the Year last year, because of these digital transformation components.
I will hold the rest of the questions to the end, and I look forward to the rest. I'll be taking notes.
Yeah. Thanks so much. All right, I'll keep moving here. So as we talked about before, being able to identify things like payment milestones at risk are a really important part as well within that. And once again, not depending on the PM to notify you of this, but that's autonomously available to everybody with visibility into the project. So if you see a low score, you can say, hey, why is this score low? This is a really important initiative for our business. And you have a right to have that explained. As a finance person, you're not going to get into the details of the project or the tasks of the process, but you can look at that quote unquote credit score and go, why is that a low number? That's worrisome to me. I know that's important. We have a lot of money associated with that. We have payment milestones, delivery, or there's big cost savings. I need somebody to explain to me why the delivery date on this is pushed out 90 days or looks like it's being pushed out 90 days, or why was this plan, are we really going to operate from a bad plan? So, all right, let's talk to another part of automation, which is resource capacity forecasting, which comes to this real-time resource management. And I spent so much time on the structure of the plan because it's sort of a fruit of the poison tree metaphor. If you don't have an accurate model for how that work comes, you're not going to be able to do accurate resource forecasting, right? So what we're looking at here quickly is a chart showing resource capacity forecasting January through April. And we're looking at it by role. And every organization has target availabilities and capacities. In that instance, we can see sort of the dashed blue line is we've got 396 hours of capacity at a solution architect, but it's pretty clear that we can see coming up in April, we're going to be short almost 5.5 people. And that's going to be a problem. That means what are we not going to deliver on if we're short that number of people? And we can also see that on project managers, we're going to be short 3, then 2, then 1. Maybe we just need to hire a contractor. We might be hearing from operations, oh, we got to hire 3 people. But with accurate information, we can say, well, we don't need to hire 3 people. Can't we just get some contract labor? Why are we going to carry that burden? Because you can see for the service delivery manager in January, we've got full capacity. We're paying 2 people and not getting any work done in that. So having that structured model, and we'll talk about modeling at the end of this first part of the process, lets you start to accurately forecast. And once again, having this data be fed by the CRM, you should be able to include or exclude what sales is saying in that process to get a more accurate picture in a forecast. So you're working hand in hand with your organization and with HR if you've got to recruit and understand that. And within our current hiring environment, advance notice is worth a lot of money around this. The other thing that you can do as well is understand who you're overburdening. So if you're burning out your best people and they're continually being asked to do 1.5 month after month after month, the statistics show that that person is eventually going to leave. And if they're your best person, those are incredibly expensive replacements in your organization. The other thing is being able to autonomously match people and tasks by skills and availability. So once again, this comes into the modeling idea, which is, hey, we've got to reformat some customer data. What are the skills required to do this? If you are an organization that delivers a similar product and service, whether it's manufacturing, it's IT services, whatever it is, there are models that you can develop and understand the skills associated with that. If you have your people and understand the skills that those folks have, and you can link to their calendars and the work they're managing, you can immediately start to identify, hey, there's only one person in this list that has the skills, that has capacity to do this. Everybody else is way over capacity. What ends up happening, and if any of you are a Fletch fan or a Spinal Tap fan, you can see some of the names here, that Bob, Gale, and Fletch are not available. They're at 300% capacity. We cannot assign those people this work, but we can assign it to Jorge. And so that can be tracked autonomously to advise or engage the resourcing manager in that process. But once again, these are the benefits that occur when you start to have structured work in that process and not just communal lists of data. Once again, finance is not a communal list of transactions. It's a structured process, and introducing that discipline into work can help solve some of that. So integration, we talked about before, which is that CRM, the future opportunities, and that will start to improve the transparency and discipline around that work. And then calendar and capacity. So one of the big things that we talk about is this doesn't require implementing lots of new systems. It's about capturing the data exhaust for the systems that you have in place today. There are standard connectors for the common CRMs where you can pull that data in, link it to data modeling. Hey, this kind of deal roughly looks like this kind of work. It can be back of a napkin estimates, or it can be a full structured plan or a mix of both. But being able to link that is not a difficult thing to do. And then calendars. People track their vacations. They track the fact that they're going to be out 2 weeks because their mother is getting a hip replacement. These are the very real things that affect delivery timelines, especially when that person is the only person with the skills available to do a task, and that project got delayed 2 days, which pushes her or him into that 2 weeks. And so now that project's delayed 2 weeks. So this ripple effect, and once again, this comes back to that probability, humans do a horrible job. And so it's why you kind of get surprised, why there's chaos and why there's stress. And I will say with the younger generation, I'm in my mid 50s. Our generation is just to kind of go pound, pound, pound. The younger generations, they're a little smarter about their work-life balance than my generation is. And I think that's the right thing to do. And they aren't going to say, hey, your poor planning and poor management is now forcing me to give up all my evenings and weekends to fix your project. Some of them may do it, but it's not going to happen the way it's happened in the last 20 to 30 years. And we work a lot on the HR technology side and the cultural side, and that becomes a big issue. And that creates a lot of churn for organization in high potential employees. And then finally, the HCM, integrating the HCM data to get cost data. So you can accurately cost the work. A lot of organizations will allocate resources and then end up having to use a much higher cost resource to execute that same work, never coming back to say, hey, we're over budget in this. And we're over budget because we're using much more expensive resources as we slotted through that we anticipated. And that can be automatically tracked. The minute you switch that resource and we get the cost linked into that, you can immediately know, hey, we're over budget on this. You're using a much more expensive resource on this. Once again, can all be automated. The last thing that I'll talk about is modeling. And there's sort of a good, better, best when you think about modeling of the work. And the modeling of the work, Robert, coming back to what you were saying, like back of the napkin, right? So you can back of the napkin resource model any kind of work effort, right? And so that's good. Hey, I think we need a data scientist and we need an integration specialist, but not full-time, maybe 3/4 time, right? That's a back of the napkin kind of swag estimate for the resources that somebody's going to need in a project. And at a bare minimum, finance has a right to expect that from anybody promoting a project. And you may or may not have cost data for that. A better version of that is in the same regard to say that you need those people, but if you know the person you're going to use, select that. And you should understand what percentage of time means for your organization. And that can also be automated, set up once, sort of set it and forget it. And then you may also say, hey, what is the time window? Well, we need them 75%, but we don't need them right away. It's only it's a month into the project is kind of when we need them. And once again, the minute you start to do that, these are percentage points that all flow to margin and all flow to the bottom line, because the more accurately you do that, other people go, hey, Nigel's available. He's got time and capacity because he's not starting. His responsibility in that project isn't until later. The best version of this is a structured work plan or a template that you would set up for repeatable processes. And by setting up dependencies, work windows, and estimates and skills associated with this, that's when the beauty of automation comes into play. That it can update calendars, process, schedule, can automatically tell you where delays occur, where risks exist. And most importantly, it buys you time. It's advanced notice of risk and problems in projects. So you can find out about that early. And you may not care that some projects are 60 days late or 90 days late. But I can tell you that most organizations, they don't go, yeah, we deliver on time all the time. We're never surprised. We never get surprised by delays. And that's the problem. And that's what upsets people. And it's almost always embarrassingly in retrospect, they can go, yeah, we should have known about this. We should have known about that. Why didn't you know about it? Well, we didn't know that digging the fiber with AT&T, that there was a dependency to open up the call center. And had we marked that, because we knew AT&T has been telling us for the last 3 months that they can't dig that fiber line, we would have known this whole project was getting delayed 90 days. So this is where back of the napkin causes huge problems for you, right? So if you have an amazing PM that's tracking all of that and monitoring it, maybe you get lucky, maybe you don't find it. But we've talked to a lot of organizations, very, very big, the blue chip consulting companies in the world that get burned because they don't do this basic structured plan. And so if you have a repeatable process, same thing, this is sort of a set and forget. You do it once, you build that out and you have that model, you link that model to your CRM, and now you have a much more accurate forecast of the timing that you need the resources, where those spikes are going to occur, and where the nadir is going to occur so you can use those resources. All right, I'm going to stop there at the end. I'll go through the modeling and then we've got time for some questions at the end. So let's talk about stages to real-time resourcing. And there's sort of an idea of kind of like a level one, we'd say is sort of a swag. Hey, we have 10 people for 10 deals, so we need 20 people for 20 deals, right? And this is where a lot of organizations are. This is the people positions kind of thing, back of the napkin. Unfortunately, you're bleeding margin on that, and you're creating issues about capacity, availability, and you're going to have the unpleasant surprise of having bad forecasts and bad data. The next level is defining the problem. Hey, it roughly takes 640 hours of dev time to do this over 90 days, so we're going to need 2 devs. This is a greater level of definition that you can automate. Moving up, and there are a lot of organizations at this level of 3, which is, hey, we need at least 4 PMs and we've only got 2. Judy and Mark are booked, quote unquote, booked at some level. But as you move up this maturity model, you get greater accuracy of forecast, and it's more responsive to change. So getting to an integrated, interactive, and automated model is, hey, we have 2 opportunities about to close that'll require 2 UI devs, 1 Scrum Master. Hey, we can use the Scrum Master from the delayed Acme project, and we need to hire 2 UI devs ASAP because sales gave them a deadline of April 22nd. So that last little part too, which is super, super important, is we know that sales gives deadlines to close deals without knowledge of whether or not it can be resourced and whether or not it can be delivered. And with a back of the napkin plan, you'll never know that reversing from that anchor date backwards, you won't know, hey, is it already too late? Are we already going to be too late? Instead of, hey, we told them April 22nd, and you go, great, we're going to get our revenue April 22nd. No, you're not. You're not going to get your revenue until June 15th. And by the way, you might get anything because it's mathematically impossible for your organization to deliver that by June 15th. So I get we're excited about that deal closing on April 20, delivered April 22nd, but mathematically we don't have the people, and how we do our work, it's simply not possible in that critical path to deliver that by the 22nd and with the people we have. It's not possible. So once again, it's this issue of rigor and accuracy and growing towards that, beginning that process. So the last thing I'll say, and then we can jump into a Q&A session, and there's a slide at the end with my email address and a link out to one of our products called Activate. One of the offers that we wanted to provide the council is if you have a current project or an engagement where you have a plan, we would be happy to debug that and audit that schedule and plan at no cost for your organization. And if it's a sensitive project, we sign NDAs for organizations around those things as well, if it's a larger scale project. But even if it's a project, 500, 1,000, 1,500 tasks, we can debug that project automatically and give you a readout to say, hey, here's where there are issues today in the plan that could affect accuracy. So Robert, that's it for my sort of formal presentation. I've got a few minutes for some more questions if you want to launch more questions.
I'm going to hit you 10 questions in 10 minutes. I'll hit you rapid fire. Question number one, when you were on the slide that talked about modeling and planning, any rules of thumb or benchmarks for planned schedule or cost variances?
Right. So there's a whole, once again, like I said, we could do a series of talks around this. So machine learning, one of the things that we have on our platform is the ability to track those slowly changing dimensions of time and data. Initially, your rule of thumb is going to vary based on your industry and your type. Ultimately, you want a system that can measure the variance that occurs from that. So the next time you enter that, we call that template variance or template performance, that you can understand how are we varying from our initial model with the actual work that was created from this model by task. So you can do total process improvement. And most organizations, the Pareto principle, that 80-20 rule, 20% of the tasks in the process are the things that are blowing everything up. And being able to identify that and put your Six Sigma black belts or green belts onto those particular tasks or projects or yourself can really make an outsized difference.
Question number two, you talked about the maturity model and level 4 and thoughts around, is there, should we all strive for all projects all the time in all size organizations for the maturity level 4, or is there like a break-even size of project or company or complexity where we should strive for the maturity model for?
So I would say for sure, almost no, you shouldn't do it for everything. It's not an efficient use of resources in your organization. I would say nearly every organization and all of our customers look at it in a hybrid approach. Some will do swag estimates for certain types of things. Oh, it's going to take 100 hours. It's going to take 20%. And then their core product delivery element that drives most of the cost for them or drives most of the revenue, they will build out a detailed, structured plan for estimates, work, and time because they want to measure and monitor that because it has a material effect on their finances. And really any technology you use should be able to accommodate this hybrid of, we're going to be soft and swaggy here, and we're going to be very dialed in on this because this is important, this is material to the business, and be able to filter those out and manage those. So you're going to have a hybrid approach. It really, at the end of the day, you guys are experts on materiality to your business. You know what's financially material to business. I would use that as your rubric around the types of work where you can demand greater rigor around that definition.
Mike, I've worked at places, don't judge, this is just a fact. I've worked at places where the project plan was not allowed to show that we were going to have a schedule variance, and we were. It was a software implementation that they took 2 months to negotiate. And the 6-month project plan became a 4-month project plan. It wasn't, it didn't take, and it wasn't going to take 4 months. Or working at a manufacturing facility to design something showed it was going to take 18 months, and they wanted it to show it was going to take 11 months. And with Microsoft Project, it's very easy to lie and submit something to your boss so he'll leave you alone. There are situations where that at least happened to me. It's got to happen to other people. I'm not how to not do it. It's with something that's much more accurate, like this tool or any tool that's this, we still could find ourselves in a situation where we have to show something because we have to show it. And just interested in sort of any thoughts you have on that and / complaining.
Yeah, no worries at all. At the end of the day, when that happens, when there's compression of a timeline, anybody who wants that timeline compressed still wants it delivered on that timeline. And so culturally, and like anything, there are cultural shifts that have to occur anywhere. Organizations have to ask themselves, are we okay lying to ourselves? Because if you are, then you're going to miss the date. If you compress an 18-month timeline, and it's really an 18-month timeline that isn't padded to 12 months, and then you don't surface how you're going to compress that with rigor, once again, to me, that's the same issue of someone coming to finance and going, hey, we're going to reduce the budget by 20%, and then you don't actually have to do any work to show what's going to happen at the end of the year. You're going to be over budget 20%. Finance has to go through and go, okay, we're cutting here, we need this and this done. You're responsible for doing those metrics. That's kind of would be a silly notion to say you could cut a budget 20% and not actually have to do the work. That culture has to exist around work. If organizations really want to go, yeah, let's compress the timeline, and who cares if it delivers on time? Well, then it doesn't matter. But if they care that it delivers on time, it's not going to deliver on time unless you figure out how to compress that timeline accurately, like you would compress a budget.
Mike, talk about maybe some checklist items or key 1, 2, 3 items when we're looking at a tool to evaluate, like yours or any tool, and it needs to integrate with all our other systems of record, because we don't want to retype stuff. So what kind of top 1, 2, 3 things should we consider when analyzing, okay, will this tool integrate with my existing systems of record?
Yep. So a couple of things. One, on the forecasting, if you're going to be hooking into a CRM, can you model the work that you do in the way you want to model it? So first of all, a lot of programs can't even model the work. Like say, oh, we deliver a widget, ABC. What is the work to deliver that widget to a customer? That's your work model, right? And the solution should, one, let you do that, because when the deal comes through in the CRM and they say, we're going to sell 57 of these in the next 3 months, that will produce the work requirement your organization has to deliver that. However, to your point earlier, it should accommodate, if you want to back of the napkin that and say, it's going to take us 100 hours or 2 people, it should allow for that. It should also allow you to build out a structured work plan with dependencies and skills and process, so you can really reap the benefits of far more accurate work and forecasting, right? So how effectively can they do real-time modeling of deals coming in the funnel in the pipeline? 2, on the integration side, it should integrate to their calendars and their schedules so you can understand people's capacity. Human beings aren't robots. They're not available 40 hours every day. And once again, margin comes down to percentage points. We live in a global competitive economy. And if you can start to pick up 2 to 4 percentage points of efficiency by reallocating resources or becoming aware where people are not available, that all falls to the bottom line. And that data exhaust is available. So real-time integration to someone's schedule and their capacity does wonders towards you understanding whether or not that person's going to be there to deliver the work and whether or not they introduce risk into your projects. The other part of the automation is, can they autonomously monitor your work plans in the background, even if the PM isn't in it? Is somebody still monitoring it? So think of it like antivirus software or firewall software. That runs even though, thank God it runs even though someone in IT isn't running it. You want something autonomously running all the time in the background to monitor these projects, whether or not someone's doing it, because that'll elevate the performance and the quality of the forecasts in that process.
Mike, any companies doing this well? If we wanted to read a white paper, or news article, or Google a company who's doing real-time resourcing or workforce optimization, any manufacturing companies or professional services, good companies to model or read about?
Oh, you're saying organizations that are doing it well today. So we've got some customers that I know that we're working with doing it well today. I guess before I didn't know that question was coming in, we could put folks in contact with some of those organizations if they'd like to talk to them, but I don't want to reveal those company names on the call today. I apologize. But as far as making that digital transformation to accurate work management, like I said, that's a small but growing number of organizations. And there are certain segments of the industry that are moving faster than others. And surprisingly, so 2 segments of that I will say that are moving more towards that. IT services, software technology implementation, manufacturing, and then surprisingly, construction. And construction's doing it because they simply don't have access to the level of PM management experience, and their work is so highly variable. There are so many things that affect it, and they can never keep up with, no human can keep up with the changes, kind of thing. That becomes really, really evident. We also do some integration with technology, autonomous interactions with machines and equipment and process for them as well. But
I'm going to combine a couple questions. So and then we'll wrap up. One cool question, you pick, or you can kind of combo and answer. Anybody doing forecasting and workforce optimization as a service, like separate entity doing it? And what's the future of AI and machine learning in this space?
Okay, so this is going to sound like a softball question, but I'm sure no one on our side said this. But we are looking to start this forecasting as a service. So large consulting companies will come in and do that modeling, but nobody currently is setting up the autonomous technology within an organization and running that autonomous technology. And we're doing that for precisely the reason maybe the question was asked, which is, hey, we want this, but we don't have the bandwidth to stand up the system. So, and we've been asked by customers to do this now, which is they're saying, hey, can you come get the integrations, set up the quick models for us, hook it to our CRM, at least so we can start to get a more accurate forecast in this process and increase that transparency. So there's no organizations I'm aware of that are doing that end-to-end work programming sort of as a service.
Last one is, for me, I'm selfish. I'm stealing the last question because this is the bane of my existence. Any ideas on how to, the gamification of this around this? And I'll give you another culture of precision example. So I have employees. I cannot get people to update their skills and availability. Schedule availability is better, but skills, when people get new certifications, new skills, they do not fill out the system of record. And it's in their own best interest to do it. And I go around saying, we use this for promotion. We use this for placing you at the next job so you have continued employment. And people are like, yawn. What am I doing wrong?
So there are two things. On the gamification side, you saw that RPAC score. So that credit score, organizations like Credit Karma and Experian and others are promoting this idea to the younger generation of like talking about your credit score like it's a big thing, and they're gamifying that process for that generation. That RPAC score, so we have organizations who are now broadcasting we have what's called an RPAC certification, which lets service organizations know, hey, we use autonomous functions to identify risk and remediation, and that helps service organizations communicate to their customers. We're going to identify your problems sooner and faster. So that matters to marketing, just like any certification an organization gets, to say, hey, we're using superior technology and process to deliver products and services. Individuals in an organization will see in customers, those PMs want to have higher RPAC scores and process. It means that they're developing and building and managing plans and process, and it's a single number that they know people will see. On the skill side of things, because it goes into the matching and the process, there are a couple of elements, and there's a larger process in that too, but the skills matching and the tasks come to someone's acceptance of that and their ratings on it. So having ratings against skills and having social proof around someone's value in that skill can drive it, just like it does in LinkedIn.
Well, this has been fantastic. We got just a taste, a reminder, and then got our minds thinking about how important this is. And this was great. Thank you so much. The mathematical root of bad forecasting, I'm going to save that image alone so that I can use that repeatedly. I will give you credit the first time, and then I will say that I came up with it. And then what a reminder around HCM costs and how the cost of variance can be so expensive. I thought, how many times have I seen senior engineering threes on an assignment that was budgeted and scheduled for an associate engineer one to do? And utilization looked fine, but profitability was terrible. Or a high-speed machine being used for a changeover because of poor scheduling. And uptime looked good, but margins were terrible. And what great insight I would have if I had this kind of information. So thank you for both new learning and now making me kind of depressed. I don't currently have that.
It's okay. It's step by step, right? It's all doable step by step. Robert, thanks so much for giving me an opportunity, and thank you to the group for giving me an opportunity to talk to everyone today. I hope you all have a great remainder of your week and a great weekend.
You too, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.